Hi friends, Christy Teji here, your host for the Productive Passions podcast. Let me ask you, is there something different you dream of doing but don't know where to begin? If you're feeling suffocated, anxious, or you feel there's something different calling you, come along with me for candid conversations with people who have embarked on a journey to put their passions to work for them. Buckle up and enjoy the ride. Life is too short to stay stuck. Hi, friends. Welcome to today's episode where we explore the intersection of creativity, entrepreneurship, and personal growth. I'm thrilled to have with me today Anya Freeman, the visionary founder and CEO of Kind Designs. Anya has made waves in the industry with her groundbreaking approach to combating climate change and protecting coastal areas. Kind Designs is a pioneering force in environmental conservation, revolutionizing coastal protection by producing 3D printed seawalls that double as artificial reefs. These innovative structures mimic natural coastal ecosystems and create wave dissipation to help reduce the damage often seen in coastal areas. In this episode, Anya shares her journey from attorney to successful eco-entrepreneur, offering insights on building a purpose-driven brand and fostering a culture of innovation and environmental stewardship. We dive into topics including the power of self-belief, surrounding yourself with people who share your passion, and the power of embracing contrarian thinking. Whether you're an entrepreneur, an environmental enthusiast, or simply someone looking to make a positive impact, you won't want to miss Anya's inspiring story and practical advice. Now let's dive in. Anya, thank you so much for joining me and for saying yes to being a guest on the Productive Passions podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to dive in.
Anya, you are the founder and CEO of Kind Designs, which was named a Fast Company of 2024 World-Changing Ideas and Most Innovative Companies in North America, as well as the 2024 Business Journal Startup of the Year. Anya, that's huge. Can you tell me what exactly does Kind Designs do and what was the inspiration for starting?
Sure. So I am originally from Ukraine. I grew up in Israel and I got the opportunity to come to America when I was already in high school. So my dad got a special talent visa. He's a physicist. So he was working with the space program in the United States. So my whole family got to come with him. And we did not speak any English. Like I did not know what to wear on the first day of school. But we were all so excited about coming here and really, really proud to become Americans. And so with that, I've always felt a deep sense of responsibility to build something great to make the most with the opportunity that I was given by becoming a U.S. citizen. And especially nowadays, because as you know, obviously, my friends and family in Ukraine and in Israel are not able to build impact companies, right? They're focused on getting to tomorrow. And so for me to do anything less would be, I think, a big waste of this incredible gift that this country and also my family gave me, bringing my brother and I here. And so I started by, like every good immigrant daughter, I started by going to law school. So to fulfill, this was my dad's American dream and my mom's high ambitions for me to find a nice American husband. So that's how I ended up in Miami, where Kind Designs is based today, because I got a scholarship to Law School. And I graduated. I started working as a lawyer, and I'm living in South Beach, living my best life, basically, as everyone does in their 20s in the city. And then I started to notice that my home, this beautiful city, had a huge problem with flooding and with rising sea levels.
Yes.
Like at the time, I lived in a house with my friends, and every time it rained, we would have to race home to move our cars to higher ground, literally, so they wouldn't float away. And so I started really paying attention to this problem. What I saw is that there was a lot of focus on this problem of rising sea levels, of flooding, but the narrative was very doom and gloom. It was fashionable to write articles and publish books about how we're all going to be underwater by 2060. And you have to be crazy to invest in a property in South Florida. And that didn't make sense to me, right? Like how we're just going to write off an entire city. And so I decided to put together a team, and together we came up with a solution to protect our city from rising sea levels, but really more than that, to set an example for all other coastal cities that are facing the same existential crisis of flooding and rising sea levels. And so the idea we came up with is 3D printing living seawalls.
Wow. So, Anya, let me just back up for a minute. You were a little girl. I mean, you were older, but still considered a little girl when you came here. You didn't speak English. Basically, you go to high school, you come out, and not only did you figure things out, but you did really well to get accepted into the University of Miami. But even not just accepted, you were given a scholarship. You go on become an attorney, and as I understand it, you opened your own law firm. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
So you become this attorney and you're working on environmental policy, right? And then not too much later, you come and start Kind Designs. That's a lot in a really short period of time.
In hindsight, I think it always seems like, oh, I just like decided, I just did it. And it really was not so linear. It definitely did not happen overnight.
Right.
What was holding me back the most, just this limiting belief I've always had that you can only do the thing that you went to school for. Like I always thought I didn't have the right education to be a startup founder, that I had to be a lawyer basically for the rest of my life, which is awesome, by the way. A lot of people, they always say, oh, you're a recovering lawyer. I don't feel that way at all. I love being a lawyer. I miss it sometimes. So it was a great experience, but I wanted to do so much more. And what was holding me back is this limiting belief. And then one day in 2021, I saw Martine Rothblatt speaking. She, like me, also went to law school, but then she went on to be the founder of Sirius XM satellite radio.
Yes.
And then she launched 8 other mega moonshots. She taught herself medicine. Forget going to school. She watched YouTube and read high school biology books and taught herself medicine so she could find the cure for her daughter's terminal illness, which then in itself became a public company. Then she invented the world's fastest zero carbon footprint helicopter. And most recently, she's 3D printing human organs. So like that, basically after I saw her, my limiting belief vanished. What was I talking about? I could literally build whatever I wanted to. After you see someone like her doing all of this, just like me having gone to law school, I realized I was really being an idiot. And so truly just by witnessing someone else do it, it broke that limiting belief in me. And so now I had the belief, I had the idea, and the next step was to get the funding. Because it's great to have ideas and have a belief. I was still working for my kitchen counter in the first few months of this venture. And so I started to raise our seed round. And in a half a year, I raised $5.8 million from amazing, very strategic, incredibly involved investors. And that allowed me to build a team, bring the robots, and together we installed the world's first 3D printed seawall in February 2024.
So, Anya, one of the things that you said is, I was being an idiot. I would challenge that because I think all of those things that you did got you to where you are now. But I loved what you said about realizing that being a lawyer, your future does not have to be linear. That limited belief that you talk about. And what's so fascinating are the guests that I talk to have that same realization. They're going down this path. And by the way, you are the third attorney that's been a guest on my podcast in less than a year. And all but one of you have gone on to do different things. But it took that journey of starting where you were to get to where you are now. And so part of the reason I do this podcast is because I've talked to so many people who feel stuck. I went to school to be fill in the blank, to be an attorney, or in my case, an occupational therapist. So I have to be that for the rest of my life.
Exactly.
You don't have to be. It really, truly is the journey. And it sounds to me like you're doing what people who do what you do, I'm saying not a lot, I'm saying do a lot, but you're following your passion. Like you talked about, you saw your city flooding and not just being doom and gloom about it, but all right, I've seen other people like figure this out. I can figure this out. Does that sum up sort of what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly right. It's exactly right. But it's really takes breaking through that limiting belief. And for me, it was seeing someone else do it. And once you see, you cannot unsee it. So that's number one. And number two, I got so sick of listening to myself. And I'm like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I have this idea, that idea. And I cannot stand it anymore. Like I am just going to start. And you never have the perfect plan. But the point is just to take the first step, adjust, take the second step, adjust, and get to a point where you burn the ships. There is no going back. You're now accountable to a team, to investors. No, the only way to move is forward and to keep building. And that's where we are now. So there's definitely no turning back.
So during the podcast, I always have points where I want to rewind because I want people to hear what my guest has just said. And what you said summed up what you've been doing is that thought, like, I wish I could do this. I wish I could do this. And not having a perfect time, just taking that first step. And then you do have to adjust because rarely do you take a first step. It's absolutely perfect. You take next step. It's absolutely perfect. And it goes from there. Right. So when it's not perfect, when you take a step and something blows up or doesn't go the way you thought it was going to go, how do you reconcile that to then go on and take another step? Is there anything that you tell yourself so that you continue to be motivated when things don't go as planned?
Sure. It's just the experience of being a founder, and this is advice I received very early on. It's just, and everyone talks about this, is like one day you think like this is it, this is the next unicorn. Oh my God. I mean, how am I going to spend all this money? And literally the very next day, you're like, that's it. We're going to be bankrupt. I'm never going to sell that thing. All the time. You have these extremes, ups and downs, day to day. And after you go through a couple, you realize that when you're down, you're just one great phone call, one conversation away from being on that high again. So you build thicker skin and you just embrace that that's really part of the journey and you're on the right track if you are having that experience.
I love to hear it. This will definitely be part of the takeaways. Each episode, I do what I call today's takeaways. And it's one of those things that the guest said that were so meaningful that are good to remember. And I think that's another one. And that's another consistent theme that I hear from founders or people who are following their dreams is they have these incredible highs. And the next day it's like doom and gloom and everything is not the way it was intended to be. And we're not going to make it. But if they are consistent and they don't give up, they stay on that path, then like you said, you're a step away from your next high or just getting back on track. So I want to ask you, Anya, how would you describe yourself?
Myself, definitely a rebel, contrarian. Yeah, usually I'm doing the opposite of what everyone else is doing. Like, if everyone else is doing one thing, and I almost subconsciously I want to do the opposite thing. And that I've actually found a way to apply myself, where it was problematic throughout my life. It's actually, I think, something that's been helpful in building this and going for something that's never been done. And being an outsider, like I didn't know anything about construction or climate technology when I started this. And because I did not know the rules, A, and B, I was not much of a rule follower anyways, that allowed us to build something from a really fresh perspective and achieve things that have never been achieved in coastal construction.
That's interesting that you say that. So almost being, and I'll use the word ignorant, not in a negative way, but ignorant of the rules and how things are done, it opened up your thinking, right? Because you didn't know what couldn't work. So you could be as creative as you wanted. Do you feel like that's accurate?
We just didn't have like limitations. Honestly, I said, yeah, like, it didn't surprise me that we were in the water within like 6 months of starting to 3D print something. Everyone else, they're waiting 2 years for the permitting and the science and everything. And we just found ways to plug ourselves into projects that already had a permit, to use components that already had the science behind it. So we kind of converged pieces and we're able to be in the market, And so yeah, that what really helped is actually being an outsider. It's counterintuitive. You think it'd be more difficult, obviously, but in many ways, it's actually when you're building something that hasn't been done before, it's helpful to see it from a fresh outsider perspective.
So, Anya, what did that look like? I could just see you knocking on the door of some project manager saying, "Hey, I have this idea. Can I put my 3D printed designs into your project?"
No, it was better than that. I convinced him to be an investor. So our customers, so we 3D print these living seawalls, obviously, and we sell them to marine construction companies, the ones who install seawalls and docks. That's usually all they do. It's a very niche type of construction. They have barges and cranes to do all this work. And in the past, they used to make their own seawall panels out of concrete using molds. Now we can deliver them the panels ready to be installed, and they have all of these amazing environmental benefits, right? They function like a reef, they dissipate wave energy, they collect data, and there's no green premium. They're actually cheaper than the traditional toxic slabs that they were making. And so it's B2B. The customer is the contractor, and it's very concentrated. There's basically in Miami like 3 companies that do residential seawalls and 3 companies that do commercial, government, larger projects. And they're all like 3rd, 4th generation. And so we approached the biggest one of all of them. They installed the first seawall in Miami Beach in the 50s. And now it's 3rd generation called Dock and Marine. And not only did we ask them to be a customer, I asked them to be an investor.
Wow.
And actually I do well in the construction space because a lot of these contractors are kind of pirates, rebels themselves. They like just to go for it, do crazy things. And so he invested in the round. He gave us a warehouse. Actually, he became an advisor. So then we have obviously mutual interests in the success of Kind Designs. And he gave me my first project. He had a customer. He was already permitting this concrete seawall for him. And very last minute, they were able to plug our panels into this project and install it in a beautiful, beautiful location in Miami Beach.
So tell me a little bit more about your panels. You're talking about the differences. Tell me about those differences. And what really caught my attention was that they collect data also.
Sure. So seawalls have always been the first line of defense to flooding in coastal cities. We've been installing seawalls since 100 years ago. The first seawall went in the water in the US in Galveston, Texas. And it's very similar to the seawalls that we're still putting in the water today in Miami Beach. It's a space where there has literally been no innovation. And the problem with these traditional seawalls, one is they're very expensive. The construction method is very labor intensive. It takes a lot of space, a lot of time to cure all these panels. Yes. And number 2 is traditional seawalls actually leach chemicals into the water. And because they're flat, all the organisms that were living by the coast, they can't attach to this flat wall. So they migrate and nobody's there to eat the toxins in the water. So within a year of installing a traditional seawall, the quality of water goes down 45%.
So you mean to tell me the seawalls that we've traditionally put up to protect the environment are at the same time hurting the environment?
Well, we put them up to protect our properties. So we're protecting the houses that are in the water, the buildings that are in the water. We're protecting them from flooding and storm surges. But as a result, they are massively hurting the environment. In the US alone, by installing traditional seawalls, by 2040, we will destroy 50,000 miles of marine habitats.
Wait. Can you say that again? By
2040, from installing seawalls,
the way we've traditionally done it.
Exactly. We will destroy 50,000 miles of marine habitats.
Anya, that is huge. 50,000 miles of marine habitat.
It's like driving Miami to LA and back 17 times.
Oh my gosh. And so what do your seawalls do that makes it different?
So we are 3D printing living seawalls. What makes them living, number 1, is the material. So it doesn't leach like traditional Portland cement, non-toxic, doesn't have chloride or metals. Number 2 is that because we're 3D printing these and we have the world's fastest and highest resolution robot, the printing layers are really, really small, half an inch. Because of that, we have design freedom that was never possible with these molds or any other 3D printers. So we are able to incorporate a biomimicry design into the seawalls. So the seawalls look exactly like local marine habitats. In Florida, it's mangroves.
Yes.
Our seawalls, they're structurally just like a regular seawall, but they look like and they function as mangrove roots, basically an artificial reef, because the roots create caves where sea life can hide from predators. And it has a very special texture, rugosity, it's called, for small organisms to attach and hang on during storm events. And finally, it has built-in sensors with which we're able to collect 15 different water quality parameters.
Wow. Well, you don't do anything small, do you, Anya?
It literally, their panels are massive. They're 10,000 pounds each. Yeah, we're definitely in the business of printing big things.
Yes, you are. How has it been to be CEO of a startup? What are some things that you absolutely could not have anticipated?
Honestly, I had no expectations. It's something I've never done before. So I can't think of anything that was surprising. It was all kind of crazy and chaotic. And I just think some learnings, like for example, I used to think that because I didn't know anything about being a founder or construction, I needed a co-founder to balance that. And I had a few failed co-founder attempts. And what I've learned is that you don't need a co-founder. What you need is a really strong team around you who has the strengths that you need to balance your own. And so we have an amazing team. A COO is amazing. Our supervisor of construction is amazing. And all the robot tech designers and the R&D people are incredible. And they each have something that really essential that they bring to the team. What's neat is that we've been able to attract a lot of people who I don't think usually would take a risk in such an early stage startup. But because there's such an impact component to what we're doing, it's amazing. We're replacing these toxic seawalls with artificial reefs. And that's super. And we're the first in the world to 3D print seawalls, period. So there's such a culture of like being pioneers and having all this positive impact on the waterways. And so it has attracted a team of people who are super passionate about the water. You know, they're all like spear fishermen. They live on sailboats. They're divers. And they're also incredibly strong and hardworking because you have to be to operate this super heavy machinery and lift all of this concrete. And that has created really fun culture.
As you're talking, and I'm thinking about the impact of storms, and we're in storm season right now, I'm curious whether Kind Designs, the seawalls, could have had an impact on what happened during Katrina. Maybe that's an unfair question. That's a really big question. But is that something that, like coastal communities, like in Louisiana, that experience so much devastation that they can mitigate by using your 3D printed seawalls?
Of course. So number one is we are democratizing seawalls. So communities that could not afford seawalls in the past, by using our technology, the idea is to bring the prices down more and more and more so it becomes affordable for all communities.
So how do you do that?
Through the technology. So we have the world's fastest 3D printer. I am printing already a 10 by 10 foot panel in 1 hour compared to what used to take a day.
Yes.
So it's exponentially faster to print. And with that, we're able to unlock a lot of exciting economics that bring down the cost. And number two is the design element. Not only is it good for the environment, but it actually helps protect the property because it dissipates wave energy. One of the problems with flat seawalls is waves, and especially during storms, they just bounce off the wall and they go to the neighbor's property or across the canal if you're in a canal. It exacerbates the problem. When you have this reef design component on the wet face, the front of the seawall, those mangrove roots absorb the wave energy. So the impact of them is reduced on the property and definitely on the neighboring properties as well. That's why it's so helpful during storm events.
So during your time practicing as a lawyer, you also at least were familiar, if not worked on policy. Is it time now to change policy to require designs such as you're printing right now to reduce the damage that we see and the expense that goes along with the damage to property and human life.
Definitely. It was not possible before. It's not like government did anything wrong before.
Right,
There was
right.
one product available because technologically we could not do better. But now, with the acceleration of innovation in 3D printing and material science, we have an ability to converge those technologies and come up with a product that's more affordable for communities and has all these amazing environmental benefits and protects the land much better through wave dissipation component. And so what we're working on is creating incentives for homeowners to be able to use living seawalls on the county level, the state, and federal. So on the county level, already we're working on a program that will give homeowners who choose to use living seawalls expedited permitting. So we don't want to force anyone to do this. We want to instead create incentives so they want to choose us, right? So already the selling point is it's the same price and you get all of these amazing environmental benefits. But now on the county level, instead of waiting 2 years for a permit, you will only have to wait 6 months for a permit.
Wow.
There's a huge incentive for homeowners. So that's on the county level. On the state level, we're looking into tax incentives, like property tax discount if you have a living seawall. And then on the federal level is to be treating living seawalls like Teslas or like solar panels, because they're benefiting the whole community. So you will actually get a rebate, a tax break if you use living seawalls. So those are the steps that we're taking, starting at the county level, which is actually the most dire need. The permitting is a big, big problem. So if we can give people a break and they can get a permit faster, that will be a huge reason for them to choose living seawalls.
So the work that you're doing sounds like it keeps you busy enough. But how are you reaching other coastal communities? Or even, I got to think that there's probably use not just in the coastal areas, but other places where there's water that floods. Would that be accurate?
So globally, there's 507 cities that are at risk from flooding, at risk from rising sea levels, that need seawalls. And in many of them, seawalls are just cost prohibitive, like I mentioned. They're already making plans to migrate communities inland. It's called climate displaced populations. It's already been happening even in the US. The first example was in Louisiana in 2016. They had to relocate a coastal community called Isle de Jean Charles because their settlement went from originally 22,000 acres. It went down to 3,000 acres because of rising sea levels. And so they had to migrate them inland. They all lost their homeland. And so we are rushing to mass produce these starting in Florida because the biggest needs, the biggest seawall market. So we're mass producing them here, democratizing it as much as possible, and then scaling to all of those cities, not one by one, but through a licensing model where we provide our technology to local coastal construction companies, and they print their own seawalls with our library of designs, our special non-toxic material, and we give them technical support. But that's the only way to reach all those cities and be able to print living seawalls at scale.
Now, do the seawalls need to be printed different depending on the geography?
Yes, so the seawalls are customized to mimic local marine habitats, so attract native species because they recognize the shapes, the textures, the structures. That's what makes it a function like a marine habitat.
So are you still developing that library?
Yes, definitely. With our free time, we always work on new designs.
That's really exciting. So could your designs be used in Venice?
People always ask me about Venice. I mean, they have very, very different technology. You've seen like they're like offshore seawalls that can actually raise and lower. So I am not sure. I'm not an expert in Venice. I'm very
one step at a time. You're not an expert, but you don't need to be, right?
Exactly. I just need to find an expert and then I give them a license, and they can do whatever they want. Do their robots there.
That's fantastic. If you could say anything to your younger self, what would that be?
Your life is going to turn out awesome. Have so much fun. Don't worry about anything. It's going to be a wild adventure to embrace it.
What's been the best thing that's happened along your journey?
Developing the belief in myself. Once you have it, no one can take it from you, right? Like breaking through this limiting belief, doing this from scratch. Like, I mean, I didn't know I could raise $5.8 million on an idea. Like we raised that money initially before we even had a robot in the United States. So now that I've gone for it in such a large scale, I know that I always can. So I think that's been incredible to see that in yourself, and you will never know unless you go for it. And the second thing is the team. So just building a team and having a very strong culture has been awesome to be able to, because usually when you work for someone, you come in and there's already a culture, right? You just try to do your best. It's so liberating to get to build your own culture and to build a really like a badass team around yourself, and together fulfilling the promises that you made to everyone that backed you and believed in you.
So I have to ask, does your company, does Kind Design have the same energy and excitement that you have?
Definitely. Yeah. Everyone here has to have this energy, do or die. We're so early stage that everyone has to wear all the hats. And we have quiet days. We also have crazy days where we're working till midnight, delivering panels in the middle of the night, try not to hit the traffic lights or something crazy, So everyone has to be like down to work hard for crazy things to come up, and also just be able to solve problems. Because when problems come up for us, because we're the first to do something, we can't like Google how people fixed it in the past. We don't have anyone to call. We have to figure it out amongst ourselves. So the guys are always coming up with innovation. And that's actually developing our intellectual property libraries. A lot of things they've kind of just MacGyvered at first. They have become patentable. So that's a big part of the culture as well.
I love that you know MacGyver. I love that you know that's a great term for what you guys are doing. Because as you said that, something else that I didn't even think about that you guys have had to figure out is the logistics. Once you have it built, getting it to and making sure you don't hit the lights, or if you have to go through a tunnel, I guess you got to figure out your route before you start down that road, quite literally.
There are so many components to this that I did not for a minute think about as I was even fundraising. I mean, you just learn. That's why you have to start, because you learn so much from like one day of actually printing, actually delivering something. I learned everything that I could have, maybe spent 2 years planning for and researching and talking to people. But we did it, and now we know what the problems are, and we're solving them, and that's just increasing our innovation.
It sounds to me like during the hard days that your excitement and being able to look back and see what you have accomplished, that's got to carry you through some of that.
Definitely. Yeah, we're definitely that. But it's funny, the hard days are actually the most memorable days, the happiest days in hindsight.
That's right. So what have been some of the hardest days that you've had?
Technologically, we had recently a big problem because the humidity in Florida overnight went to like 90%. It was 100 degrees. And all the concrete that we have here, all the dry mixes, and we have like hundreds and hundreds of $1,000s worth of material here, it all clumped.
Oh my
and
gosh.
It would not go through basically the silo into the robot. And we tried, and we had a big order we had to fulfill at the time. And we tried calling the manufacturer of the silo, the manufacturer of the robot. No one had a solution for us, because even these silos, for example, they're repurposed. They're usually used for sugar manufacturing indoors.
Yes.
The people who manufacture that, I have no idea. No one's ever used this outside, And so after failure for 2-3 days, the guys just said, we're just going to build something ourselves. And they literally went to Home Depot, got a bunch of parts, and in a few hours built an internal fan system which circulates the air as the materials being fed into the silo, and it worked incredible. They literally ultimately the system they built cost $56 a part, and we now have a patent pending on it.
That's incredible. I love that story, and I love that innovation. So Anya, how do you stay grounded?
I don't stay grounded. I just work.
Yeah, if you stayed grounded, we may not have all the innovation that we're seeing from Kind Designs, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I don't really believe in work balance, especially in the early years. I think you have to embrace the pain. I want to be the first female unicorn in Miami. They've never had a female unicorn, not just for myself, but just that I saw the impact of seeing Martine Rothblatt, who I mentioned earlier in the podcast, and seeing what she had built. And that was such a awakening moment for myself. When like with 2 Mile, once one person broke 2 hours, record in the, sorry, not the 2 mile, in the marathon. Once
Yes.
ran in 2 hours, then so many people ran it under 2 hours in the next year. So for that reason, I'm really driven to have the first female unicorn company in Miami. But when you have that plan, I'm not really gonna say goal, it's inevitable. When you have that plan, you can't expect, to have a nice work balance and come here 9 to 5 and then and do all this stuff on the weekends. That's just not the way. Like you have to want to embrace the suffering and then have kind of delayed gratification for the work you put in early and really enjoy it. It's fun. It's like going to battle and we're all together building something that hasn't been done, having the opportunity to achieve something that hasn't been achieved. That's really fun. There's nothing I'd rather do.
I love to hear that. I love to hear that. You're definitely following your passion. That's evident. Who's been the most influential person in your life, and do they know it?
My family is very influential. That's why I always start with my family story. My parents giving me the opportunity to come to America. My life would be completely different right now if I was living in Ukraine. I can't even imagine. So that has been a big influence. But also there's a culture of entrepreneurship and innovation within my family. So my dad's actually a very well-known physicist. He has over 100 patents for capacitors, which are used in military applications, medical applications, mission critical components.
What is a capacitor?
Capacitor, I always have a hard time explaining what my dad does and my brother, but basically it holds electricity. So every electronic device has a capacitor which holds the electronic charge. Anything from a cell phone to a rocket has capacitors. So his capacitors are used in rockets, so in space, in extreme conditions, like drilling oil, for example, extreme heat, and also medical devices like the heart monitor, for example. The capacitors are so small and they can hold so much energy that they're able to now implant these monitors into people's bodies where before it wasn't possible. So growing up with him, we were always around innovation and kind of expectation of greatness. I always just knew my dad was like the smartest person in the room and he always expected us to be that, which I think nowadays people think that's too much pressure for a child. I'm really grateful I had that upbringing. I always expected straight A's for myself and to do great things. And then most recently, my brother also has a great startup. So it's really fun when we all get together. And that's been very influential for me.
So what's your brother's startup?
So also hard to explain. So he's doing a dual PhD at Harvard and MIT.
Oh my goodness.
He's doing computational biology and AI basically. So his startup has to do with AI in the cancer data space.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
So he's in school and working on that. Yeah. So we share a lot of investors. So they say their investment thesis is the Freeman family.
I was going to say, you've heard the phrase, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You guys are really following in at least your father's footsteps of innovation and really believing in yourself. I like that you talk about that so much. I think that's one of the things that, I know because I talk to so many people who have incredible dreams, but never take that step because they just don't feel like they're capable of doing it. So I love that you really talk about belief in yourself as being so important. And I take notes as we're talking, and I wrote that down and I have stars all next to it because you really emphasized how important that was.
Definitely. If you're not going to believe in yourself, nobody will. It's crazy not to give yourself that gift, that opportunity, that life experience. I can't imagine looking back and having the regret of not having gone for something that I really, really wanted to try.
So, Anya, if you were talking to a young girl in high school or junior high who had big dreams, but was very shy or scared to step out, what advice would you give them?
It's really helpful to have a mentor, have someone whose footsteps you can follow. So when you're young, like internships really help me. I have amazing champions in my life and I met them through interning. And it's such an opportunity when you're young to try different things and intern in different places, right? Because you don't have the responsibilities, financial responsibilities that you do when you're older. So when you're in school, I made the most. Like every break, I had like 2, 3 internships. I was always working, always, always, always. And then I had developed the champions who helped me later on in life. And it's so important. Proximity is power. Tony Robbins always says that. When you are in proximity to people that are taking risks, that are building something big, that have crazy ambitions, it's so contagious. You start expecting that of yourself and you lose the fear. It kind of normalizes that. So it's really important to surround yourselves with mentors or experience, like work experiences that will give you that proximity, and also the friends groups. It's so awesome. I know it's rare, but if you have a passion for entrepreneurship, building something impactful, you surround yourself with a few friends that are also going for it, and you have that, like we call it zone of genius, when you're bouncing ideas, right? And you're in this like this exciting, energetic field together. It's incredibly, incredibly impactful.
It is important to have those people who will cheer for you, champions, as you call them. So, in those times, like you talked about earlier, when you have an extreme low, you can pick up the phone and talk to them, and they can get you right back where you were in terms of motivation and encouraging you to keep going. Does that sound
Yeah, but
right?
not anymore. I think it's my responsibility now to pull myself back. I know now that I have a whole team. I'm the CEO. I cannot make those calls. Also, I don't want to scare anybody. I'm keeping the morale of everybody. And a lot of those champions are also my investors. So it starts and ends with me. I have to have the strength, the belief, the plans, the solutions, and then coordinate it with my team, but to instill that confidence in everybody.
So, that was important for you getting started and taking a chance on yourself. Is that correct?
What was important?
Having those champions and surrounding yourself with those people,
Definitely.
that zone of genius, as you say.
Definitely. Yeah, the champions are very, very important. And it is people that you can start meeting and building very early on in life. And you never know, like my champions, like for example, my champion in the legal world is a former US attorney, Kendall Coffey. He gave me my first job out of law school. I met him through the Russian speaking Chamber of Commerce. And then I founded the first Russian American Bar Association with him. So, anyways, he's my first boss. He helped me in the legal world. And then now I'm doing something completely different. I'm in the startup space, but I had a situation where we were at risk of being sued, basically. It was a horrible situation. I was super scared. I didn't have any money for a litigator. And then he stepped in. And by the way, he's like the most well-known lawyer in South Florida. His rate's like $1,000 an hour. I could never afford him. And he said, come here. It was Sunday. He said, come in the office. We went through the full file. He wrote immediately a letter to the opposing party, and everything changed. Because when they saw that I had Kendall Coffey on my side, they got scared, and they knew that they could not pursue us with a bad faith litigation, and they couldn't take advantage of us, and they could with an early stage startup in a difficult financial position. And all of that, he didn't charge me $1. All of that was because of the years I have of good faith I've built with him, and in a completely different space, but he was still able to come in and protect me and get us out of this horrible situation just with a phone call.
That's important to have those Kendall Coffees in our
Yes.
lives, right? So thank you, Kendall Coffee, for supporting Anya and being there for Anya and Kind Design. Anya, I got to ask you, I know you're not done with this yet, but when you think to the future, what's next for you?
Oh, I have like a million other things I want to build. Yeah, this is just the beginning, definitely. Also, once you feel the high of building something, I don't think you can put that down. It's so much fun.
So you're going to be doing this for quite a while, this starting and trying new things.
Definitely. I want to build many, many more things. And as you start, you actually come up with more ideas because you're just around this zone of genius. And the second thing I'd love to do is to support this ecosystem in Miami and be able to invest in other startups and more importantly, the founders that I really believe in are doing impactful things. And so that's definitely something I'm looking forward to when we succeed here in the near future, all of us as a team to be able to then invest in other startups in the space as we also keep building something here as well.
How important is that to you to give back?
Well, that's really what drives me. I mean, you can only get so excited if you just think about what you're going to win from something or gain. I think when you feel really like emotional and like so passionate is when you think about what you can help your team gain, your community gain. And then you have almost like the universe on your side. That's why I feel like things have happened so quickly with us. It's kind of hard to believe. a year ago, I had $0. I had one person, Emmy, who we just met on my team, was employee number one. We didn't have a robot here 1 year ago. And already we have this massive, massive momentum, seawalls in the water, revenue, team, robots. And it's because what we're building is so much bigger than ourselves. And when it is so, then you really have this, almost feels like luck all the time, but universal support where things really come together for you. So yeah, it's really, really fun.
Interesting. I've been following Simon Sinek for a little while now, and he talks about exactly this. It sounds like when he talks about your why, how things fall into place, and those are not his words, my words, but when companies remember their why and why they started, they tend to be successful in the long run. And I think just by you doing what you're doing, you talk about how you were inspired. I think you are inspiring a whole other generation. So if we have people listening that feel inspired and wanted to reach out to you, how could they reach you?
Sure, all of our contact information is on our website. So kinddesigns.com.
Okay.
So our email addresses, and we actually have a big following on Instagram because I'm always posting the guys doing cool things. So it's Kind Designs Official.
Okay, you're on Instagram. Where else?
Yeah, that's it. Instagram, Kind Designs Official, and our website.
Okay. Anya, thank you so much for spending this time with me. It has been such a pleasure. I knew when I heard you speak at a pitch challenge that you won, by the way. I wanted to.
We always win those. Yeah, we're pretty good at it.
For everybody listening, I'm sure they can see why you always win. It is your passion, it is integrity, all that comes across. It really comes across that you are doing what's important to you and you're looking to make a difference in the world. And I have to thank you for that.
Thank you so much. This is amazing. I really appreciate Christy sharing her message and giving us a platform to talk about this.
My pleasure. Anya, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.